Hello. Welcome to a slight tutorial on how to do the or use the Magic Datapack for Minecraft. Um, and so first of all, you install it like any other datapack and you put it in the datapacks folder of the world. You can even do this now while generating the world, which is really nice. And once you have it there, you'll have to go to Datapack. Um, or use the datapack command and you can list and it'll actually be automatically applied. It should show up as mc-magic or whatever you named it to. If it's not enabled, you can go ahead and run, or here I'll disable it for you. You can go ahead and run enable file mc-magic and there you go. Before you can actually start using this data pack, there is a little bit of setup that needs to be done. And so you can execute that with function magic setup. And once you do that, it should be pretty much set. Um, and it runs pretty normally, or like it it does not really change core mechanics of the game, but it does add to them, or it adds on top of them, um, such as experience is used as your mana bar now. Um, and then it also adds more features such as spells, and then custom magical monster spawns that are actually quite more difficult than your normal opponents. So it does add a little bit more of a challenge to the game, but it adds a lot more tools to play the game with and enjoy. Um, and it even has it even has a slight it has a magical flex system, is what I like to call it. Um, and that works kind of like machinery, like you might see in FTB. It's not nearly as complicated or um, probably interesting either, but it does provide some nice quality of life. Um, but to get started, um, first you have to gather some experience. And you can't see your experience bar in creative mode, so that's a little disappointing. But um, I'm just gonna go ahead and give myself some free experience. Um, And be sure to always add it to points rather than levels because it will not track levels as points. And the points are what matter when it comes to mana. So now that I have some experience, I actually have mana for casting spells. But first, I need a spell. So we're going to have to craft one. So to do that, or to craft a spell, first you need a crafting altar. And to make one of those, you need a lapis lazuli block and an item frame. And all you need to do is just place it somewhere and place the item frame on top of it. Doesn't really matter where, and it doesn't really care about its surroundings. And now that you have that, you need to make a spell. So we'll give ourselves a book and quill and write a spell recipe. Um, Now spell recipes are um, there are only certain things that well you can put a lot of things in the book, but only certain things will be processed. Um, and it's used directly in telling what each one does. Um, but before we get there, there is a nice little tool in game that lets you use this. So we'll go ahead and get ourselves set up with that. Um, so we'll need an enchanting table and a book to craft ourselves an arcane compendium. And so you place the enchantment table down, an item frame, and a book, and it will go ahead and craft an arcane compendium for you. And it provides some simple details on magic, how to craft a spell, and other things. And it's currently a work in progress, so if you see some pages that look funny or if it's lacking some information, there's more detailed explanations on the design document linked on my GitHub page. Anyways, now that we have this, we can go ahead and write a spell recipe. And so there's a couple shapes and there's a couple elements, but we'll do something basic. Um, we'll start with, let's do just a frost bolt. So first we want to give it a spell shape and a spell element. And it doesn't really matter what order they're typed in because they're all processed at the same time. When casting a spell, different elements take different shapes and elements take different priorities in the order of casting spells. But in the end, whatever you type in here, all of it's going to get cast. Every combination. And so now that we have the spell recipe, we can go ahead and put this in this item frame. And here's a list of requirements of what it needs. Um, or and now, yeah, here's a list of requirements. And so now what we have to do is give it the ingredients at once. And so for every spell first, we need to bind it to a stick. Um, and that way we can have a wand to cast with. And you'll see if it likes the item that you toss in, it'll remove one of these dots that indicate the amount of components you need, and it will highlight the item. Be sure you only toss in one of every item. Even if you put multiple of the same element on a spell, it'll only process it as one, and it will only consume one of that item. If you have multiple items, or like if you have a stack, it will consume that whole stack. So be sure that you only have one there. Because this is a projectile spell, we'll need a snowball, and we will also need an arrow. Just so it can toss stuff. And then because it is an ice spell, we will need a white tulip and a snow block. And I'll go ahead and hop on survival for this. And once it's done, it will craft your spell for you. And now we have a wand. However, we can't cast this wand yet because we need some paper. In conjunction with wands, you need paper for spells to cast. Everything except for bound spells, which are on hit. And this paper kind of acts as the center point for the spell, and it handles all the information. And if the scroll or the paper is destroyed, then spells can actually be canceled mid-cast. But anyways, here's our wand, and you see it has some information as to what spell it's holding. So that way it's pretty easy to keep track of your spells, but if you want it to be even easier, you can just take out an anvil and rename it for one level. So this is a frost projectile spell. And then we need some paper. So I'm going to go ahead and cheat and give myself some. And now you'll see it's giving me a magic snowball in my right hand that I can toss, and it will actually bind the spell to it, as you can see with the particles. And you can also see that the spell scroll actually flew with the projectile. Spell scrolls will travel with spells depending on the medium. Such as beam spells, it will always dump the spell scroll at the end of the beam. And that way they can be combined for easier and more interesting outcomes, allowing them or making them much more interesting tools. So let's go find something to freeze. There was a fox running around, but I don't know if he's still here. Here we go. He's running. He doesn't like me. And you'll see that I slowed him down, except not much because he's a fox. But it definitely did work, and it did freeze the ground below him as well. And so that's just a very basic frostbolt. But yeah, I lost my crafting altar, but that's fine. And so that's kind of how to make a basic spell. That's how you make the arcane compendium. And there are definitely other things you could do. You can combine spells. So let's do. How about we do a beam spell, and we'll do a beam that's mixed of frost and fire. And some spell shapes are considered level 2 because they're more complicated or intense. And these involve beam spells and point spells. And so they will actually require more resources. And then when you have more elements, that requires more resources as well. So this spell is pretty expensive, has a long list of items. Um, but if you're like me and you like to play around in creative mode, or just like toy around with random spells, um, you can instead just put down a command block as your crafting altar with quotations, put the recipe in there, and it'll instantly craft the spell for you. And so as you can see, we have this beam fire frost spell, and we'll go ahead and cast that. Notice it has both the frost and the fire effects on it. And so if I shoot it along the ground, what was that? Oh, the berry bush. It will both freeze the ground and set it on fire. Or if I shoot it in the water, well, it's not working so much right now. I think it's because I have both fire and frost combined. Those don't like to interact with each other. But you get the idea. And then you can also combine spell shapes. So let's have a regular point spell. We'll cast this spell on that point on that piece of paper. And so it'll throw 3 fireballs at this piece of paper for this fire point spell. But we can also, if we combine that with the beam, so point, beam, fire, not only will we get a spell that fires a beam, but it'll fire the point spell at the end of the beam. And so that's how the paper can be used for placement of the spells and how spell shapes can be combined. Everything's going to burn down now because forest do not like fire. That's one other thing of this. Everything starts to get a lot more destructive, which is fine if you like that, because these spells do actually affect the environment around them, and there are monsters that like to use these spells on you. But overall, that is about the basics of this data pack. I'm going to leave the rest for you to find out. And if if you don't like that, then you can go ahead and look around in the design document and other things. But there you go.